The summer night in Clearwater was heavy and still, the kind of quiet that pressed against your ears and made shadows seem alive. The summer festival had finally wound down. Ferris wheel lights dimmed, and the laughter of teenagers and children slowly faded into the warm air. The smell of fried dough, popcorn, and cotton candy lingered, mixed with the faint tang of gasoline from the bumper cars. It was a night full of memories waiting to be made, but for Elena Marquez and Sofia Rivera, it would become the night that changed everything. Before diving in, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated on our latest cold case stories. Drop a comment and tell us where you are watching from right now. 17-year-old Elena had been sketching in her notebook throughout the festival, her pencil scratching the edges of the page as she captured the glow of carnival lights and the subtle motion of people passing by. Her curly hair glimmered faintly in the last light of the Ferris wheel, her eyes wide with excitement and exhaustion. She tucked the notebook under her arm and smiled at her best friend. Sofia, 16, jogged to catch up with Elena, her soccer bag slung carelessly over one shoulder. She was energetic, fearless, and often impatient with the world's slow pace. Her friends joked that she had been born running. Tonight, though, even Sofia's competitive edge was tempered by the golden haze of twilight and the fleeting magic of the festival. The two girls said their goodbyes to the festival grounds with laughter, sharing stories of the day's small victories. Sofia winning a prize at the ring toss, Elena sketching a portrait of a stray dog that wandered near the food stands. Their conversation was light, punctuated with giggles and teasing arguments over who had run faster at the obstacle course. It was exactly the kind of carefree evening that Clearwater families cherished. At home, their parents felt a mix of relief and unease. Ricardo and Camila Marquez, Elena's parents, had spent the day running their bakery, preparing for the weekend rush. They worried as they always did when their daughter ventured out at night. "Be home by 10, Camila reminded Elena at the doorway, her voice gentle but firm. Ricardo nodded, offering his own warning. "Stick together, no detours, and call if anything feels off." Across town, Hector and Isabel Rivera gave Sofia the same instructions. The girl nodded earnestly, dismissing their concern with a grin that barely hid the excitement in her chest. Both families watched their daughters pedal away on their bicycles, Elena on her lavender Schwinn with a basket full of her sketches, Sofia on her sleek black road bike, and waved until the girls were swallowed by the quiet streets. The ride home along Highway 47 was familiar but deceptive. By day, the road was a simple, straight path from the festival grounds to their neighborhoods. By night, the stretches between houses seemed endless, dim streetlights casting pools of weak light and deep shadows. Tall grass rustled in the fields, and the distant hum of insects filled the silence. The girls joked to pass the time, racing side by side, their laughter bouncing across the empty asphalt. Somewhere along that road, in a curve flanked by cornfields, shadows deepened. The night seemed heavier here, the silence more absolute. Elena glanced at Sofia. "Feels weird here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Relax," Sofia said, though her hands gripped the handlebars a little tighter. "It's just this section. Nothing happens here." But both girls had the uneasy sensation that someone, or something, was watching. It was gone in an instant. A flutter of movement, a shadow, and then nothing. They sped up, hearts racing, unaware that they were already at the edge of a story that would haunt Clearwater for decades. By sunrise, the first hint of something being wrong arrived in the form of abandoned bicycles. A passerby, on their way to early morning errands, saw the bikes lying on the gravel shoulder. Their chains rattled in the faint morning breeze, wheels spinning lazily as if waiting for riders who would never return. A closer look revealed the horrifying truth. The girls were gone. Ricardo Marquez was the first to respond. He had been on his early morning run, jogging the same streets Elena and Sofia would have taken when he noticed the bicycles. Panic surged through him as he sprinted to inspect them. "Elena? Sofia?" His voice cracked, echoing across the fields. No reply. At home, Camila tried calling Elena's cell phone. Nothing. Not even a ring. Across town, Hector and Isabel did the same, heartbeats accelerating with every unanswered call. By 7:30 a.m., Detective Lena Ortiz and Detective Marcus Lynn arrived on the scene. Ortiz, meticulous and calm, immediately took control, instructing officers to cordon off the area and start documenting the scene. Marcus Lynn, younger but equally methodical, began recording witness statements, social media posts, and early tips. The bicycles told a story. 2 girls riding together side by side, then suddenly gone, leaving only twisted handlebars and tire tracks as evidence. Friends who had attended the festival were questioned. They remembered Elena and Sofia leaving on time, waving goodbye. Some recalled a dark-colored sedan idling near the festival exit, though the memory was fuzzy. Others mentioned a man at the edge of the crowd wearing a denim jacket. No one got a clear look. These details, though tantalizing, led nowhere. Shadows without substance. The community mobilized quickly. Flyers were printed with the girls' photos. Elena, smiling, a pencil tucked behind her ear. Sofia, a wide grin, hair pulled back in a tight braid. Posters went up in shop windows. At the gas station, along the highway, search parties formed, combing the fields, the forested edges of town, even the banks of the nearby river. Volunteers called out the girls' names, voices cracking, echoing off the darkness and morning fog. Within hours, the story had spread across Clearwater. News vans rolled in, local reporters broadcasting live from Highway 47. Community meetings were convened. Parents, neighbors, and friends pored over maps, theorizing, retracing every step, every joke, every decision made the night before. Anxiety rippled through the town, each unanswered question feeding a growing sense of dread. At home, families struggled to maintain composure. Ricardo Marquez drove every back road, retracing the route his daughter would have taken. Camila Marquez hovered at the phones, alternating between prayer and frantic calls. Hector Rivera wandered the empty streets near their home, questioning every passerby, imagining scenarios that made his stomach turn. Isabel Rivera sat in the living room, rosary beads clutched, whispering prayers into the quiet morning. The police conducted interviews in detail. Vendors from the festival remembered the girls smiling, joking, carefree. Locals recalled seeing groups of teenagers leaving in various directions. The detectives painstakingly reconstructed timelines. Social media posts and cell phone records were analyzed, yet every clue seemed to evaporate in the heat of the morning sun. As hours turned into days, a pattern of frustration emerged. Early theories, runaway, prank, accident, were dismissed by families who knew the girls. Detective Ortiz noted every lead, but each hit a wall. Clearwater, small and intimate, offered no anonymity to strangers, yet someone had made the girls disappear. The town's sense of security, once so palpable, now seemed fragile. Elena and Sofia's absence became the focal point of conversations everywhere. Neighbors whispered, speculated, worried. Teenagers at school avoided eye contact with adults, unsure what to say. Family and friends were gripped by helplessness, watching the investigation unfold, seeing nothing progress, the days stretching into an unbearable haze. And yet, as the first week ended, the subtle signs of hope remained. Detectives Ortiz and Lean continued their work with methodical determination. New leads emerged daily, small discrepancies, eyewitness details, objects found along the roadside. Every bit of evidence hinted that the story of that night was waiting to be uncovered, carefully hidden beneath layers of time, fear, and human forgetfulness. The truth was out there, hidden along the lonely stretches of Highway 47, in the shadowed fields, in whispers that nobody yet knew how to interpret. And when it finally surfaced, it would shock Clearwater and the world completely. If you want to follow the trail from this chilling disappearance to the secrets that have been hidden for years, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. The story is only beginning, and the truth is closer than it seems, but it isn't ready to reveal itself just yet. The disappearance of Elena Marquez and Sofia Rivera sent shockwaves through Clearwater. In the days immediately following July 12, 2010, the town held its collective breath. searching for any sign of the two teenage girls. Detective Lena Ortiz and her partner, Detective Marcus Lynn, led the official investigation, but even their combined expertise struggled against the thin evidence and elusive leads. From the moment the abandoned bicycles were discovered on Highway 47, Ortiz understood this case would not be straightforward. She reviewed the scene meticulously, noting details the initial responding officers might have missed. Tire tracks in the gravel hinted at movement, but the impressions were faint, eroded by the summer breeze. A lone sock had been found near one of the bikes, small, pink, unremarkable at first glance, yet it became a point of focus for forensic testing. Marcus Lynn, with his tech-savvy approach, scoured social media and local forums, hoping someone had posted a photo or message that might provide a clue. But in 2010, Clearwater's online footprint was limited. Few people used smartphones with cameras, and social media was still emerging in small towns. Lynn's frustration grew with each dead end. Meanwhile, Ortiz and Lynn canvassed the festival grounds, speaking with vendors, parents, and teenagers who had attended. Witnesses gave varying accounts. Some claimed to have seen Elena sketching near the art booth just before 9:30 p.m., while others remembered Sofia racing across the festival field, laughing with her friends. One vendor, an older woman who ran a lemonade stand, described noticing a shadowy figure near the festival's edge around 9:50 p.m. The memory was vague, just a man standing still, observing the crowd. But it planted the first seed of suspicion that someone unknown might have been lingering that night. The detectives also visited the girls' schools. Elena's sketchbooks were examined, revealing pages filled with pencil drawings of local scenery: the river bend, the old mill, the wooden bridge over Clearwater Creek. In the margins, she often wrote short observations about people she saw: a man walking alone near the soccer fields, a neighbor tending his garden unusually late at night, someone who might have appeared ordinary to most but caught her artistic eye. None of these entries suggested danger, but Ortiz kept them in mind. Sofia's notebooks, on the other hand, were filled with soccer strategies, team stats, and motivational quotes she'd written to push herself to be the best. Her competitive spirit was evident on every page. There was nothing that suggested fear or anticipation of harm, just the normal pressures of teenage life. At home, both families were unraveling. Ricardo and Camila Marquez alternated between frantic searches and moments of paralysis. Camila clutched Elena's sketchbook and wept quietly in the kitchen, sometimes reading aloud passages that seemed like small windows into her daughter's mind. Ricardo spent hours driving the back roads, calling out Elena's name, checking every abandoned structure, bridge, or wooded area he could find. Similarly, Hector and Isabel Rivera were consumed with worry. Isabel organized neighborhood flyers with Sofia's photo and description, while Hector returned home from work only to find his house silent, his daughter absent. At night, they would check the windows, the driveway, and the streets, hoping against reason that Sofia would return. As the days passed, detectives interviewed friends who had attended the festival with Elena and Sofia. Most of them confirmed the girls had left on time, their plan simple: head home, get ready for school the next morning. Some friends admitted to lingering at the festival, playing arcade games or trying their luck at carnival prizes. Nobody reported seeing anything unusual. No stranger engaging with the girls, no car idling suspiciously, nothing that could be immediately actionable. The frustration was palpable. It was during these interviews that Victor Kane first emerged in the investigation, not as a confirmed suspect but as a person of interest. Kane was a quiet man in his late 30s, a local loner who lived just off the main highway near the festival route. Neighbors described him as odd but mostly harmless, someone who kept to himself, rarely interacted with others, but occasionally walked the fields near the highway late at night. His behavior was suspicious only because of its persistence. He seemed to be present in the area surrounding the festival on multiple occasions prior to the disappearance. Detectives Ortiz and Lynn paid close attention to his movements, mapping them against Highway 47 and nearby backroads, but there was no concrete evidence tying him to Elena or Sofia. Other minor suspects were interviewed and eliminated. Transients passing through Clearwater were questioned, some of them seen near the festival grounds, others loitering along Highway 47. Festival workers, too, were meticulously questioned about their whereabouts and any unusual encounters with attendees. Nothing stood out. Every lead seemed to dissolve under scrutiny, leaving detectives with a slowly growing stack of unhelpful reports and witness statements. While the official investigation pressed forward, life in Clearwater was on hold for the families. Elena's room remained untouched. Her journals and sketchbooks were stacked neatly on her desk, open to pages of sketches she would never finish. Sofia's trophies and medals, symbols of her dedication and drive, remained on display in her room, untouched by dust or time. The girl's absence was not only emotional but physical, a constant visible reminder of the void left behind. The months stretched on. As 2010 bled into 2011, search parties organized by the community dwindled. Flyers faded, peeling from lampposts, telephone poles, and store windows. Yet both families refused to relent. Ricardo and Camilla returned each day to check the same roads, the same fields, hoping something overlooked would emerge. Hector and Isabel doubled their efforts with local schools and churches, reaching out to anyone who might have information. The emotional strain began to show in small, almost imperceptible ways. Camilla started having trouble sleeping. Ricardo's temper flared at minor frustrations. Hector and Isabel's marriage faced tension under the weight of grief. By 2012, the case began to edge toward cold status. The detectives had exhausted the usual investigative avenues. They consulted regional law enforcement, reviewed similar cases in nearby counties, and attempted to use emerging technology, including early GIS mapping to analyze local abduction patterns. Marcus Lynn tried to compile digital records of festival attendance and social media activity, but Clearwater's population was small, and the digital footprint was sparse. Even the nascent smartphone technology of 2010 was limited. There were no high-resolution street cameras, limited cell tower triangulation, and few citizens had devices capable of capturing clear images at night. Still, Ortiz remained cautious not to dismiss potential leads. Victor Kane's proximity to Highway 47 was noted repeatedly, and over the months reports surfaced of strange objects near his property. Discarded clothing, unverified footprints, and the occasional late-night observer who swore they saw him pacing the edge of his land. Nothing could be directly tied to the girls, but Ortiz cataloged everything, convinced that small, seemingly insignificant details could later become crucial. The detectives also maintained a careful eye on environmental cues around the disappearance site. Highway 47, though a familiar route for locals, had stretches of dense woodland and shallow ditches. Seasonal changes revealed areas that had been previously overlooked. After heavy rainfall, tire tracks would reappear in the gravel, and after windy nights, debris would shift, uncovering small objects previously buried. Lynn documented these patterns, hoping that one day forensic analysis might make sense of these subtle signs. School life for both girls' peers continued, but the absence of Elena and Sofia left its mark. Teachers noted empty seats, soccer practices were quieter, and the festival was forever tinged with the memory of that July night. Some classmates reported nightmares of seeing the girls on the side of Highway 47, beckoning them silently, an unsettling echo of reality bleeding into dreams. These psychological threads, while anecdotal, highlighted the pervasive fear and grief in the community. By 2013, media coverage had largely faded, with only the occasional update in local papers. Yet both families refused to let their daughter's memory diminish. Community events often began with a moment of silence, and on the anniversary of July 12th, small vigils were quietly held, candles flickering in the summer night. Ortiz and Lean occasionally revisited the case, pulling old evidence from storage, re-examining witness statements, and testing emerging forensic techniques. However, with limited physical evidence, the case repeatedly stalled. Throughout this time, Victor Kane remained a shadow in the background. His property, isolated and unassuming, was never fully searched due to lack of probable cause. While minor sightings and unverified reports suggested he had been a consistent presence near the highway, no tangible connection to Elena or Sofia could be established. Despite his quiet demeanor, he became a symbol of unresolved tension in Clearwater, a figure embodying the fear of the unknown. By 2015, the investigation was officially categorized as a cold case. Ortiz and Lynn maintained file updates, noting any developments in nearby abduction cases or behavioral patterns in similar suspects. They established digital folders for the girls' diaries, school notes, and personal sketches, hoping one day forensic technology might allow for new breakthroughs. Community interest was limited but persistent, with parents of other teenagers occasionally checking in, motivated by empathy and shared concern. The cold case, however, was far from forgotten. Friends of Elena and Sofia occasionally came forward with seemingly trivial memories, a glance at a festival booth, a fleeting encounter with a stranger, or the faint sound of a vehicle engine on Highway 47 that didn't match known records. Ortiz cataloged each account meticulously. To her, no detail was too small, no observation irrelevant. By the close of 2015, Clearwater had settled into a quiet rhythm. Families continued to grieve, communities held onto fragments of hope, and Ortiz and Lynn prepared for the day when new information, perhaps a piece of evidence overlooked or a technological advancement, would finally illuminate the night of July 12, 2010. Until then, Elena Marquez and Sofia Rivera remained missing, their story a haunting echo along the quiet stretches of Highway 47. Have you ever followed a case that seemed unsolvable, where every lead went cold? Do you have a theory about what might have happened to Elena and Sofia? Subscribe now to follow this investigation as it unravels further. You won't want to miss what emerges next. The summer of 2019 arrived like any other in Clearwater. Warm nights filled with the hum of cicadas and distant traffic along Highway 47. But for the families of Elena Marquez and Sofia Rivera, the world was about to shift in a way no one could have predicted. It was June 12th, a Wednesday, when a construction crew was clearing land 15 miles outside of Clearwater near the small Willow Creek neighborhood for a new housing development. Bulldozers roared, and the smell of freshly turned earth filled the air. The property had been vacant for decades, overgrown with weeds, trees that had claimed the land, and an abandoned shed tucked behind the brush. Nobody had thought much about it. The land had changed hands several times, always sitting idle. Marcus Webb, the backhoe operator, was digging foundation trenches that morning, the sun climbing steadily above the horizon. His bucket hit something solid just a few feet down, and at first he thought it was a forgotten slab of concrete or an old septic tank. But as he cleared the dirt, the shape became unmistakable. A deliberate structure, rectangular, with cinder blocks forming walls and a partially collapsed plywood roof. He killed the engine and climbed down, his boots crunching over the loose gravel and soil. "Ron, you seeing this?" he called to his supervisor, Ron Hastings, who had been coordinating the crew. Ron crouched down, eyes widening as he peered into the hollow space. "Call the cops, now," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. By the time the deputies from the Clearwater Police Department arrived, the crew had cordoned off the site as best they could with caution tape and orange cones. Detective Lena Ortiz and Detective Marcus Lynn were among the first on scene, their boots crunching on the gravel as they assessed the unusual structure. Inside, the air was damp, stale, and heavy, and then they saw it. Skeletal remains. 2 sets, partially covered by debris and collapsed wood. Fragments of clothing were still recognizable: denim, cotton, and the rubber soles of sneakers long decayed by time. A class ring, tarnished and caked with dirt, glimmered faintly in the morning light. One deputy carefully brushed away the grime to reveal an engraving: ER 2010, Elena Rivera. The words hit Detective Ortiz like a physical blow. She looked at Marcus Lynn, who was already taking detailed notes and photographs. This can't be," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Within hours, Dr. Nia Brooks, a forensic specialist with experience in cold cases, was on site. Swabbing the remains, carefully collecting samples from bone and fragments of clothing, she explained to the detectives that DNA confirmation would take a few days, but that preliminary examination indicated the remains were consistent with 2 teenage girls missing since 2010. News traveled fast. By late afternoon, Camila Marquez and Isabel Rivera were brought to the station, their faces pale and anxious. not fully understanding why detectives had requested their presence. When Lena Ortiz gently laid out the scene, Camilla's hands shook violently, and Isabel's knees buckled beneath her. It's them?" Isabel whispered, voice breaking. Detective Lynn nodded. "We need to confirm through DNA, but everything points to Elena and Sofia." Shock, disbelief, and grief washed over the families in waves. Years of unanswered questions, of imagining every possible scenario, suddenly collided with this stark reality. They were gone, found 15 miles from home, buried in a place that no one had thought to look. As the forensic team worked, Ortiz and Lynn began to trace any potential connection to Victor Kane, the local loner who had remained a person of interest since the early investigations. His property had always been close to the highway, though it hadn't been thoroughly searched at the time. Kane had lived alone, quietly, always keeping to himself, which in a small town made him an easy target for suspicion but difficult to pin down. Detectives reviewed public records, eventually obtaining the details of his old storage unit, rented under his name in a nearby town. There, they discovered boxes filled with personal belongings, journals, photographs, receipts, and other items that indicated an unhealthy fascination with the Marquez and Rivera families. One journal entry, dated July 10, 2010, read in faint scrawled handwriting, "They will be mine. Tonight, I will see the problem solved." The timing sent chills down Ortiz's spine. The search of the unit also revealed photographs of the Clearwater Summer Festival, taken surreptitiously from a distance. Faces of teenagers blurred, but in several images, Elena and Sofia were visible, laughing and walking together, completely unaware. Investigators theorized Kane had been tracking them, waiting for an opportunity. The pieces began to form a horrifying picture. The girls leaving the festival, isolated on Highway 47, with Victor Kane's property nearby. The abandoned bikes found months ago were consistent with them being lured or forced off the road. The chamber discovered at Willow Creek might have been deliberately prepared, a grim contingency that Kane had planned for. For the families, this knowledge was almost unbearable. Camila Marquez sat in the precinct, her hands clasped around a mug of lukewarm coffee, staring blankly at the table. Isabel Rivera rested her forehead in her palms, silent, tears rolling freely. For nearly a decade, they had held on to a fragile hope, searching for any sign that their daughters were alive. Now, the horror of their deaths became concrete, wrapped in the certainty of evidence. Detective Ortiz walked them through the process, carefully explaining the DNA testing. "It will take a few days for results, but everything we've found makes it highly likely that these are Elena and Sofia," she said, her voice steady but gentle. The forensic confirmation came quickly. Within a week, results were definitive. The remains were indeed Elena Marquez and Sofia Rivera. Cause of death: blunt force trauma to the head, consistent with rapid, violent assault. Both had been killed within hours of leaving the festival. The community's reaction was immediate. Social media erupted with shock and grief. Local news stations covered the developments non-stop, and Clearwater's residents began to revisit memories of the festival, the missing girls, and the initial investigations. Search parties, fundraisers, and memorial services, once organized in vain, now carried a heavier, tragic significance. Even though Victor Kane had passed away in 2017, the evidence left behind allowed investigators to reconstruct the likely events of that fateful night. Using forensic evidence, witness statements, and Kane's journals, a timeline began to emerge. Around 10:05 p.m. on July 12, 2010, Elena and Sofia had left the festival, riding home along Highway 47. Witnesses later recalled seeing a dark-colored SUV parked suspiciously near the edge of the fairgrounds earlier that evening. It had left before the girls departed, but detectives theorized Kane had been scouting the road, waiting for an opportunity to intercept them. By 10:15 p.m., the girls were likely on the isolated stretch of Highway 47, where the streetlights thinned and the rural landscape opened to fields and woods. Kane's property was less than a mile off the highway, accessible by a narrow dirt road that blended into the surrounding brush. Investigators believe he flagged the girls down or forced them off the road, possibly under the guise of offering assistance, perhaps claiming there had been trouble ahead, a flat tire or some minor distraction. The girls, polite and trusting, may have stopped. Within minutes, they were overpowered, taken to the chamber, and killed. The abandoned bikes found earlier that year were the silent witnesses to the horror, a testament to lives interrupted and stolen. The chamber itself, carefully constructed, indicated premeditation. Cinder blocks, a makeshift plywood roof, and a hollowed space had allowed Kane to conceal his crime for nearly a decade. Despite the grim reality, the story did something unexpected. It reignited curiosity, engagement, and hope in the true crime community. Viewers and followers were drawn in, following the investigation as it unfolded, analyzing every clue, and speculating on the events of that night. And this is where you, the audience, become part of the story. The details uncovered so far hint at the sequence of events, but the full night, the moment of disappearance, the chilling encounter, the final moments, remains only partially reconstructed. What really happened in those final minutes? What thoughts ran through Elena and Sofia's minds? How could someone live above such a secret for so long, undetected? If you're following this investigation, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. By subscribing, you'll be among the first to explore the full reconstruction of that night, uncover hidden details, and join the conversation as we piece together the story. Comment below your theories and tell us what you think truly happened to Elena and Sofia that night. Even now, the evidence continues to offer new insights. Forensic teams are analyzing soil, debris, and remaining fibers from Kane's property. Digital forensics comb through his old devices, emails, and social media posts. Every detail is scrutinized to understand the scope of his planning and obsession. For Camilla and Isabel, knowing the truth brought a bitter mixture of closure and heartbreak. They finally knew their daughters had not been forgotten, not misled, not lost to chance. They had been taken, yes, but now the story was clear, the path of investigation illuminated, and the evidence undeniable. As the investigation continued, the community began to process its collective grief. Memorials were held near Willow Creek, candles flickered in the night, and the two families, once isolated by private sorrow, began to connect with others who had followed the case for years. Their stories inspired conversations about unsolved cases, child safety, and the persistence of justice, even when delayed. This discovery proved something profound. Even after nearly a decade, after years of uncertainty, the truth could surface. And when it did, it demanded acknowledgement, reflection, and action. The full reconstruction of that night, the complete sequence of events, the encounter, and the moments leading to the chamber would come next. But for now, the revelation of the chamber, the skeletal remains, and the connections to Victor Kane had irrevocably changed Clearwater. The past, once a distant, hazy memory, had finally reached the present, and everyone who had cared, everyone who had watched, waited, and hoped, was now on the precipice of learning what really happened to Elena Marquez and Sofia Rivera. The summer night of July 12, 2010, stretched across Clearwater with its usual warmth, the scent of wildflowers mingling with the faint, lingering aroma of festival food. Fireflies danced in the cornfields beside Highway 47 as Elena Marquez and Sofia Rivera pedaled home from the Clearwater Summer Festival, laughing as they raced each other along the dimly lit road. Their bikes glinted under the weak glow of scattered streetlights, a rhythmic hum accompanying their tires on asphalt. It was just after 10 p.m., and the last sounds of the festival, the faint beat of music, the chatter of late stragglers, were fading behind them. Detectives Lena Ortiz and Marcus Lynn, along with forensic specialist Dr. Nia Brooks, had spent weeks piecing together the evidence recovered from Victor Kane's property and storage unit, trying to reconstruct the night that had taken Elena and Sofia from the world. The chamber had revealed its secrets, but the full sequence of events, the final moments of the girls' lives, remained a chilling puzzle. The reconstruction began with what was known, the festival exit. Witnesses had recalled seeing the girls laughing, their arms brushing as they pushed their bikes through the thinning crowd. Elena, carrying her sketchpad tucked under her arm, had been recounting an idea for a new painting, while Sofia, competitive and energetic, had teased her about losing another race along the festival path. Their conversation, innocent and carefree, was abruptly cut short once they reached the relative isolation of Highway 47. By 10:10 p.m., the detectives theorized the girls encountered Victor Kane. Kane, a man whose quiet presence had masked his dark obsessions for years, likely saw them coming down the road, alone and unaware. From the journals recovered in his storage unit, one entry stood out. They were on the road too easy to reach. Tonight, the plan unfolds. Investigators interpreted this as a deliberate, premeditated act. Kane had been tracking them, perhaps for weeks, observing routines, the festival path, and the routes students took home. The exact nature of the encounter remained speculative but horrifyingly plausible. Kane may have forced the girls off the road, coercing them under the guise of needing help. A flat tire, a fallen item, a warning about trouble ahead. Alternatively, he may have acted with sheer audacity, running them off the road and overwhelming them before they could react. Their abandoned bikes, still found near the roadside, spoke of a sudden, violent interruption. Tires spinning, baskets swinging, lights dangling from handlebars, silent witnesses to the terror that had begun. By 10:20 p.m., the girls were on Kane's property, a narrow dirt road leading into dense trees and brush shielding the small, dilapidated house from view. The area was secluded. No neighbors within earshot, no lights piercing the darkness. The chamber, pre-built and hidden, awaited. Forensic analysis suggested that Kane's planning was meticulous. The cinder block structure, the reinforced plywood roof, and the hollow interior indicated preparation, not panic. Detective Ortiz and Lynn reconstructed the sequence meticulously, walking the path from the highway to Kane's property, noting the visibility of the area, possible escape routes, and the soundscape. Summer crickets and distant night creatures would have masked movement, while the slight incline and forested edges concealed footprints. The girls, unaware of the looming danger, likely had little chance once Kane had established control. Between 10:30 and 11 p.m., the fatal assault occurred. Dr. Brooks explained the forensic findings. Both girls suffered blunt force trauma to the skull, multiple strikes delivered with precision. There was no evidence of sexual assault, no signs of robbery, no struggle indicating restraint or captivity over a long period. The attack, though rapid, was methodical, an execution designed to leave no survivors. The DNA, bone analysis, and pattern of injuries suggested the assault was deliberate, focused solely on ending the girls' lives. At 11 p.m., the chamber became their final resting place. Kane had dragged their bodies into the hollow, carefully placing them inside and covering them with debris, soil, and the collapsed plywood roof. The location, 15 miles from Clearwater proper, was far enough from the festival and the highway to avoid detection, yet close enough for Kane to reach with minimal effort. The forensic team's ground-penetrating radar and soil analysis later confirmed the stability of the chamber's structure and the lack of disturbances until the day of its discovery in 2019. The investigation revisited the families at this point, bringing Camila Marquez and Isabel Rivera into a private room where detectives and Dr. Brooks explained the reconstructed sequence. Watching the timeline unfold, the mothers' faces shifted from disbelief to horror, their hands clenching to maintain composure. The room was silent except for occasional soft gasps, the weight of imagining the girl's final minutes pressing heavily. Camilla whispered almost to herself, "I can't believe he lived like that for so long, knowing what he did." Isabel's eyes were fixed on the timeline chart, the small notes indicating times, distances, and forensic markers. "And all this time, we searched everywhere but here," she murmured. Atmosphere and sensory details played a critical role in the reconstruction. The detectives described the isolated highway, the faint rustle of cornfields, the chirp of nocturnal insects. They explained how the forested property would have muffled sound and obscured vision. Even the chamber itself, damp and cold, with the faint scent of earth and decay, contributed to understanding the environment Kane exploited. Dr. Brooks noted how the body placement and skeletal positioning offered insight into Kane's methodical approach, the calculated nature of the assault, and the certainty with which he had executed his plan. Detectives Ortiz and Lynn discussed subtle clues that had gone unnoticed in 2010. Victor Kane's property, while near Highway 47, had been outside the initial search radius. Flyers and community searches focused on accessible fields and main roads. An abandoned, wooded property 15 miles away had not seemed significant. The combination of isolation, preparation, and timing allowed Kane to remain invisible. The emotional impact on the detectives themselves was significant. Ortiz, seasoned in cold cases, had never felt the sting of such a calculated plan executed in broad daylight under the guise of night. Lynn, usually analytical and removed, admitted in private moments that understanding the girl's perspective, alone, vulnerable, unsuspecting, made the evidence almost unbearable to process. Yet, both understood the importance of documenting the reconstructed events in detail, ensuring the full scope of Kane's actions was understood. The reconstruction also highlighted the limitations of modern investigations. While forensic tools in 2019 were advanced, DNA matching, ground-penetrating radar, soil analysis, they could not recreate the victim's consciousness, the terror of realization, or the psychological trauma endured in those final minutes. Yet, the combination of tangible evidence and careful speculation allowed a credible timeline, one that investigators and families could rely upon. Community impact was immediate. As news of the chamber and the reconstructed timeline spread, Clearwater residents revisited memories of 2010. Witnesses from the festival recalled fleeting moments. Someone watching near the exit, a dark SUV parked at the edge, but had dismissed them at the time. Now, those memories gained chilling significance. Local social media groups buzzed with discussion, theories, and reflections on how such a tragedy could have been concealed for so long. Despite the horror, the reconstruction offered a measure of closure. Families could finally visualize the sequence, understand the mechanics of the crime, and see the evidence linking Kane to the girls' deaths. While this could not undo the loss, it provided certainty in a way that years of speculation had not. Dr. Brooks emphasized that understanding the forensic timeline also informed prevention. The step-by-step reconstruction illuminated how isolation, opportunity, and predatory behavior intersected. Awareness campaigns, local law enforcement briefings, and educational programs could benefit from these insights, potentially preventing similar tragedies in the future. As the timeline concluded, detectives gathered the families one last time. Ortiz gently addressed them. "We can never erase what happened, but knowing how it unfolded helps us honor Elena and Sofia. It ensures they are remembered, that their story is told accurately, and that we continue seeking justice in memory of their lives." The room remained silent. Camilla finally spoke, her voice steady but thick with emotion. "I just want people to remember who they were, not just what happened to them, and to know we didn't stop searching." Isabel nodded, her hands trembling slightly, and that, even after all these years, truth can still surface. For the audience following this story, the reconstructed night raises more questions than answers. Could this have been prevented? Were there signs overlooked? Witnesses whose observations could have altered the outcome? The step-by-step timeline exposes both the meticulous planning of Kane and the gaps in initial investigations. This is your opportunity to engage. Comment below and share what you think investigators might have missed. Could small changes in observation, community awareness, or patrol presence have altered the tragic outcome? Your thoughts are part of keeping Elena and Sofia's story alive. Even as families began to process the reconstructed night, investigators continued to comb through every last detail. Soil samples from Kane's property, recovered fibers, digital footprints, and journal entries painted an increasingly detailed portrait of his obsessions and planning. Analysts studied every photograph, every note, and every minor clue for insight into his state of mind and the logistics of the crime. The reconstructed timeline is more than a record. It is a testament to the persistence of investigative work. It demonstrates how forensic science, careful deduction, and the dedication of detectives can piece together events that, for nearly a decade, seemed permanently shrouded in mystery. As night fell over Clearwater once more, the story of July 12, 2010, remained vivid in the minds of those who had followed it closely. Yet, for the families, the reconstruction provided a framework for mourning, understanding, and eventually healing. Every detail, from the moment Elena and Sofia left the festival to the tragic final act in the chamber, was now documented, a stark chronicle of lost innocence and the relentless pursuit of truth. The community, the investigators, and even those learning of the story for the first time now had a clear, horrifyingly precise timeline of events. And while the pain of loss remained, the certainty of understanding, of knowing exactly what happened on that summer night, marked a turning point. In that moment, it was clear that the full story of Elena Marquez and Sofia Rivera could finally be told. Every detail, every reconstruction, every careful forensic step contributed to preserving their memory and ensuring that no one would ever forget the path of those final hours. The clarity of that reconstructed night marked a turning point, not just in the investigation, but in the lives of everyone who had carried the weight of Elena Marquez and Sofia Rivera's disappearance for nearly a decade. For years, their names had existed in Clearwater as unanswered questions, faces on aging flyers, candlelit vigils held in hope rather than certainty, two teenage girls who had ridden into the darkness one summer night and never come back. Now, for the first time since 2010, there was no longer uncertainty about where they had gone or what had happened to them. The truth, however devastating, had finally come into the light. For Camila Marquez, that truth settled slowly. In the days following the final reconstruction briefing, she found herself returning to Elena's room, a place she had avoided lingering in for years. The door still creaked the same way it always had. Sketchbooks remained stacked neatly on the desk, their pages filled with half-finished drawings and ideas that would never be completed. A faded festival wristband hung from the corner of a mirror, untouched since the night Elena left. Camilla sat on the edge of the bed and traced her fingers over the worn comforter, remembering the last time she had told her daughter to be careful, to come straight home, to text when she arrived. For years, those memories had been haunted by not knowing. Now, painful as it was, knowing gave her something she had been denied for so long, certainty. Across town, Isabel Rivera experienced the same complicated reckoning. Sofia's soccer cleats were still tucked away in a closet, their soles caked with dried mud from the last practice she ever attended. Isabel had once considered donating them, but something had stopped her. As she held them now, she realized why. They were proof that Sofia had been here, that she had lived, laughed, competed, dreamed. The truth did not erase the grief. It reshaped it. Clearwater felt the shift almost immediately. News of the confirmed findings spread quickly, not with the shock of discovery this time, but with a heavy finality. Local residents who remembered the summer of 2010 spoke openly about where they had been when the girls vanished, how they had joined search parties, taped flyers to storefront windows, scanned roadsides for any sign of two bicycles. Now, those same roads felt different. On a warm evening in early August 2020, the community gathered at the Clearwater Community Center for a candlelight vigil. Hundreds of people arrived quietly, carrying small white candles protected by plastic cups. Some had known Elena and Sofia personally, others had only known their story. But all came for the same reason, to honor two girls who had never been forgotten, even when answers seemed impossible. Detective Lena Ortiz stood near the back of the crowd, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She had spent years learning how to maintain professional distance, but that night, it was impossible. She watched as Camilla and Isabel stepped forward together, lighting two candles and placing them side by side at the center of the gathering. No speeches followed immediately, just silence, the kind that carries more meaning than words ever could. When Isabel finally spoke, her voice trembled but did not break. For 10 years, we lived in a space between hope and fear. Tonight, we stand in truth. It hurts, but it also heals. Camilla nodded beside her, adding softly, "They were more than what happened to them. They were joy. They were light. And that's how we want them remembered." The vigil ended with applause, not loud, not celebratory, but steady and unified, a collective acknowledgement that Elena and Sofia mattered. Behind the scenes, the investigation continued. Not in search of answers anymore, but in service of accountability and learning. Victor Kane had been dead for years, his body buried long before the truth about his crimes surfaced. There would be no arrest, no trial, no sentence handed down in a courtroom. For some, that absence of traditional justice felt incomplete, but Detective Marcus Lynn saw it differently. Justice isn't always about punishment, he said during a later interview. Sometimes it's about truth, about naming what happened, about making sure no one disappears into silence. Evidence recovered from Kane's property and storage units was cataloged, preserved, and archived. His journals, chilling in their casual cruelty, were analyzed not for prosecution, but for understanding. Patterns emerged: isolation, surveillance, opportunity, a predator who blended into the background because no one knew where to look. Those lessons mattered. In early 2021, Clearwater officials announced the formation of a dedicated cold case initiative, modeled after successful programs in larger jurisdictions. It was created in honor of Elena Marquez and Sofia Rivera, with a focus on re-examining long-dormant missing persons cases using modern forensic tools: DNA analysis, digital reconstruction, geographic profiling. Detective Ortiz was asked to help oversee the unit. She accepted without hesitation. "This case taught us that time doesn't erase truth," she said. "It just hides it, and our job is to keep looking." For families of other missing individuals, the initiative became a source of renewed hope. Tips long dismissed were revisited. Old evidence was retested. Stories that had faded from headlines were told again, this time with new eyes. Elena and Sofia's legacy extended far beyond their own case. In July 2022, a permanent memorial was unveiled near the Clearwater Community Center. 2 benches, placed beneath a row of flowering trees, faced the open field where the summer festival was held each year. A simple plaque read, "In memory of Elena Marquez and Sofia Rivera, gone but never forgotten, 2010. People began to leave flowers there, notes, sketches, soccer ribbons, quiet reminders that 2 lives had left an indelible mark on a town that refused to let them fade away. Camilla visited often. She would sit on the bench and sketch, just as Elena once had. Not because she was good at it, but because it felt like a conversation, a way to stay connected. Isabel sometimes joined her, bringing coffee, sitting in silence, sharing memories that no longer felt as heavy as they once had. Healing, they learned, was not linear, but it was possible. As the years passed, the story of Elena and Sofia continued to reach new audiences through investigative reports, community discussions, and those who shared their case so others might learn from it. Each retelling carried responsibility, to be accurate, to be respectful, to focus not on the monster who took their lives, but on the lives themselves. 2 girls who loved art and soccer, who laughed at festivals, who rode their bikes home on a warm summer night believing the world was safe. Their story became a reminder of vigilance, of community, of the importance of noticing what feels out of place, of asking questions, of never assuming that time has erased the possibility of truth. And to those watching, listening, following this story, remember this: cases like Elena and Sofia's are not relics of the past. They are lessons written in loss. They ask us to stay aware, to stay compassionate, and to keep demanding answers for those who can no longer speak for themselves. If this story stayed with you, share it. Talk about it. Keep these names alive. And if there's a case you believe deserves attention, bring it into the light. Because justice may arrive late, but it still matters when it does. Thank you for joining us in uncovering stories hidden in the shadows. Every victim deserves to be remembered. Every truth deserves to be told. To follow more cold cases, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share these stories. Your support helps keep their voices alive.